In this episode of The Landscape, Sylvan and I speak to Andi Grabner, who has worked at Dynatrace for the past 16 and a half years as a DevRel. But he's not just a DevRel there. He's also a DevRel of the CNCF graduated project called Keptn, or is also known as Keptn v2. A popular project in the CNCF has been written in Go and TypeScript. And what is Keptn? Keptn is an open source control plane for automating cloud-native application delivery and operations. It simplifies continuous delivery, progressive deployment, and automated remediation using an event-driven architecture. Keptn integrates with various DevOps tools, ensuring quality gates and self-healing for improved system reliability and streamlined workflows. With over 350 forks, more than 2,000 stars in GitHub, and 70 contributors, it's no surprise it's a popular project. Let's hear directly from Andi about what makes Keptn so special. Let's check it out. All right, Andi, thank you so much for joining The Landscape. Now, first things first, what problem does Keptn solve?
Well, I think there's more than one problem that Keptn solves, but let me start with the one that I like the most. It brings deployment observability into Kubernetes. And what that means is we've all lived through that, right? You deploy, you make deployment changes. All of a sudden, your Argo takes much longer than before. All of a sudden, after the deployment, things don't go as expected. And so what we do with Keptn, we provide observability into the deployment process as you are deploying changes to your workloads on Kubernetes, whether you're deploying one workload or multiple workloads that belong together to a bigger application or change. Keptn provides observability, and it's doing it by emitting OpenTelemetry traces. So you actually get to see an end-to-end trace of everything that happens in Kubernetes as you make deployment changes. So you can see where things slow, where things are failing, what has changed from one build to another, because you can also compare traces. So that's one of the problems Keptn solves.
Now, although there are many features, if you had to choose one that's a favorite, which one would it be and why?
Well, I think that pipeline observability feature is actually major, right? Because we've been, what we see in the industry, we are deploying very complex applications on Kubernetes. With complex, it means many moving pieces, containers and workloads that we own, containers and workloads that we don't own, but that are needed for the application. And so getting that visibility into what's happening as we deploy is key. And if I have maybe one second addition to this, Keptn can also validate the deployment, meaning Keptn at the end of your deployment can validate whether the deployment was successful by evaluating what we call SLOs, service level objectives, by pulling in data from your observability platform. So this would be my favorite.
All right, so now that we understand what Keptn can do, could you share us a little bit more about stories of end user company using the tool successfully?
Sure, definitely. And I think one of the favorite stories is actually an app that I use on my phone on a regular basis. It's actually my mobile banking app. So I live in Austria. I'm using the bank from Raiffeisen, one of the local banks, and they've been one of the first to adopt Keptn to automatically validate releases. So that means I can make sure when I open up my mobile app that the version that I get in my hand was validated by Keptn, because they've integrated this into their CI/CD pipeline. And there's also a public blog about this. So folks, if you want to read up to it, it's a nice local story from my local Austrian bank.
Very nice. Do you have another one to share with us?
I do. So one of our users is a very large telco in the United States. Cannot give the detailed names, but what they do, they embed Keptn in all of their Kubernetes clusters as they stand them up for development teams. So if a developer wants a new Kubernetes cluster to deploy their workloads, it automatically comes with a Keptn pre-installed to automatically validate that their deployments work as expected. So I think that's a really cool story, because we're talking about hundreds of Keptn instances that are floating around in those Kubernetes clusters in a very large telco.
In terms of other projects that are in the CNCF, how does Keptn integrate with them?
Yeah, I would say one of the capabilities of Keptn is what I mentioned earlier, the validation of deployments. And for that, we are looking into metrics. So we're pulling in metrics from Prometheus, from Datadog, from Dynatrace, from any type of data source, and bring it back natively into Kubernetes. Where are these used? They are used for HBA, for CADA, for any tools that make decisions about actions that they do based on metrics. So we see people using, as I said, Keptn, bringing in metrics to make automated scaling decisions, HBA, CADA. We also have seen people using it for automated rollouts for the Canary deployments. And so this is where we also integrate with tools that I mentioned again, CADA, HBA, Argo rollouts, and tools like that.
It's quite clear when the project should be used. Could you give us some insights as to when you think Keptn is not the answer?
Yeah, so historically, we talk about kind of our first generation of Keptn is Keptn V1, where we also had a kind of like an orchestration engine in Keptn. Now, the current version of Keptn, which we also internally refer to as Keptn V2, we removed this particular piece because we know there's many other tools out there that have focused on this, like, can use Argo workflows or any other workflow tools for orchestration. So I think where Keptn should not be used as a first choice is to orchestrate certain processes within the deployment pipeline. Use the tools that are great for that, and then use Keptn to get observability into those deployments and to validate deployments, but not for the actual orchestration.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's always good to draw the line. Like, there are so many projects in the CNCF landscape, and sometimes some of them kind of, creep on the other side. So what now that I think we have a good understanding of the project, how can you share with us how solid it is? Like, what companies are supporting it, contributing to it?
Yeah, I think the best way is actually if you look at the dev stats from the CNCF, and I also did this. Dynatrace is the major contributor because we kicked it off initially, but we also see Cloudbees, Google, and several other companies that have been contributing to it. As you know, in any type of for any type of open source project, it's always a little challenging to get official endorsement from end users. There's also a lot of contributions from people that are contributing on a personal basis, even though they work for a large organization where they use it. But I think the CNCF, the dev stats are a great testimonial and show what are the companies. And I said Dynatrace, Cloudbees, and Google are the top three that we see in there.
And as a maintainer, are there any shout outs that you like to give to people that have, stood out along the way?
Yeah, I would say, there's a couple of people that we should highlight here. There's especially my colleagues on Dynatrace. I want to just highlight them because they have been from the beginning when we launched this project years ago done a phenomenal job in pushing it forward. And I think we also had a couple of folks that helped us to promote Keptn at different regional KCDs or also at KubeCon. So, I don't want to pick out individual ones, but I think everybody that has actively contributed and especially presented Keptn to a larger community that we couldn't communicate to directly because most of us are sitting here in Europe, a big shout out to those people.
So when it comes to the project stability and roadmap, where are you?
Yeah, so Keptn, current state is actually we're feature complete, believe it or not. When we set up the goal for the current version of Keptn, so that we also refer to as Keptn V2, everything that we learned from the first version, then we shifted gears and focused on the key use cases we're currently supporting. We have become feature complete as a couple of months ago. And so, yeah. And what we now want is obviously more people adopting what we have, talking about it, and also taking maybe some ownership and see where else we can bring this project to.
And if for people that out there that want to get involved, that might want to start contributing, what kind of contributors are you looking for, or what's the best way to start participating in Keptn?
Well, the best way is, first of all, right, we are part of the CNCF Slack channel, so you can find your own Keptn channel there. Also, we are always looking for people that can share their adoption stories. But we also want people to, give us feedback and also define if there is additional need for extensions to help us there. So, for instance, one of the things that just recently came up is somebody was asking for a Keptn metrics provider for Grafana, and so I think that would be great to help there. If you have any experience on that, as I said, Keptn can pull in metrics from different observability tools. We already have a couple of integrations, but people are asking for more integrations, and that would be a good way to start.
And Obviously, you spend a lot of time on this project, but in your free time, what do you like to do?
In my free time, I believe it or not, I like to dance salsa.
That's something I wasn't expecting. When did you start dancing salsa?
We're actually here in Austria, believe it or not, we are not known for salsa, more for waltz.
Now you are. Yeah, now you are.
Yeah. I started 20 years ago, and salsa also made me meet my wife, who I've told you earlier is Colombian. That's why I speak un poco español. But yeah, no, salsa has definitely changed and impacted my life in a very positive way.
Very good. I love music. I love dancing. I wouldn't go so far as to say that I actually can do salsa dancing. I would like to. What was the learning curve like that regarding that? We talk a lot about, the learning curve in terms of Kubernetes, cloud native projects. What was it like to learn salsa?
Well, I had a little of an advantage because I started ballroom dancing when I was a teenager, because that's like a very common thing to do in Austria. When you are like 14, 15, you go to dancing school, and I really enjoyed it. So I was already dancing before, so I knew how to move my body. But from a salsa, and I think with everything else in life, there's different phases you go through. So in the beginning, it takes a little bit, because the most important thing is that you stop thinking about what your feet should do. It takes a while until you get to the mode where it becomes a natural movement and you don't think about it anymore. So this is the first kind of hurdle. Then you are plateauing for a while, at least it was for me, on kind of the moves you can do and how creative you become, because you typically just repeat the same patterns. And at some point it makes a click or whatever. I don't know how to best describe it. But then you make the next big move where you all of a sudden become very creative, and you start creating your own combinations, and you just enjoy the music, the person that you dance with, and then you just go with the flow.
That's wonderful. I think we'll definitely need to incorporate that in a future KubeCon, and maybe a salsa class if you'd be willing to do that.
Why not?
I'm happy to speak Spanish, to dance, to do whatever's necessary to make that work. One thing that we didn't ask, though, the name itself, where does it come from? Is it referring to a captain? Is it referring to something being kept inside? Where does the name Keptn come from?
Good question. So it's actually the German phonetic for captain, for a captain of a ship. And so I think the idea was always, right, we wanted to steer these containers into the safe haven of a production cluster. And I think Keptn, also as it's spelled, is the German phonetic of the way you pronounce captain in German.
If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do so?
I think the best way is probably through social media. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so search Andreas Grabner. I always call myself Andy, as you can see, or I also like my friends to call me Andy, but my official name is Andreas. And also I'm a little active on Twitter still, but kind of not as active anymore. You can find me on the CNCF Slack, also under that same name, Grabner Andy. And pretty much it's my general social media handle.
Perfect. Andy, thank you very much for your time today. All the hard work that you've done on Keptn. Looking forward to cross paths with you soon. Learn more about the latest and greatest features, contributors in Keptn, and also some salsa moves, which will be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, let's try this out at KubeCon North America.
Thank you, Andy.
I love it. I'm in.